So thanks for coming tonight. This is Bee Talks. It's the second Thursday of the month. We have this every month. We have been having it every month for about 30 months or so. So we've got a Bee Talks video that goes up on YouTube. Doesn't get many views, but it's up there if you want to review any of the old Bee Talks that we have. And I just want to start by going over our schedule from now until the end of the year. We've got coming up on the 20th, which is not very far from now. It's only 7 days away. So next Thursday, we've got Aaron Anderson, and he's going to discuss beneficial of bee habitats and reducing pesticide risk. So I think it'll be a great talk. And that's a 6:30 talk on Zoom next on the 20th. And then the next event we have, talking event, is me on Bee Talks on November 10th. And then for November 15th and December 5th, to round out the year, we have Kimberly Stoner, who is a naturalist, and she's going to talk about native pollinators. Very interesting person to listen to. And you'll learn all about the native pollinators in Connecticut, including, our Western honeybee. And then to follow that, predicting bee health in a changing world. So Christina Grosinger, somebody who's grown in the lab circles for the last 5 years and has gained popularity. And she's an extremely versed scientist. And she has talked to us at CBA and has talked to us live many, many times. Okay. Over the years, and I'm looking forward to what she has to say now, because she's done some research. Then Bee School starts January 7th for folks that want to go. People are registering already, and that's great. And now that'll round out our year and begin 2023. We have an interesting lineup, a very exciting lineup for 2023. I'll go over that in future Bee Talks. I think you'll be really surprised with the wonderful speakers we have lined up next year. We also are planning on doing 2 live events next year. And they will be one in the spring and one in the fall, and where we will gather as a group again and in person and do a talk live. And probably a hive inspection at one point. All of our hive inspections are live, but we'll bring a guest in to do a hive inspection also. So we are going to try to slowly transition over to events where we see each other, other than a blank screen. And we might do a combined Bee Talks. Like a live event that has both Zoom and a live person, so that they're a little bit complicated. But I just did one up in the Bristol County Beekeepers Association 2 weeks ago, and it went very well. So they had a video crew there, and it really went well. So we can pull it off if we get the right video equipment and lineup. So we're looking for folks that are willing to help us with that. So if anybody out there has the kind of video experience that we may need, and if you had it, you'll know. It won't be just, it's not just a simple matter of pointing a camera. It's a matter of coordinating the whole Zoom and live presentation together in a quite a seamless way. So folks that know video know how to do that. And so we're asking for help if somebody is out there and wants to help. All right. Anything else, Jose, I should talk about before we get started? Or Paul, you're on the call. Anybody?
No, I think that's it. You should probably know that we are.
Well, lost your voice.
Who are having an issue logging on, so I'm trying my best to get them in.
What do you mean?
The link is not working for some people.
Wow. It must be folks that have that are using the old link that went bad. Yeah, please do. I didn't see anything in the is it chat people that are talking?
No, I'm getting emails.
All right, could you take care of that?
I'm doing it. Yep.
Thank you so much, man. That'll help a lot. All right, so the only thing I have to share on the Bloom calendar, so I won't bother with a share screen, is that around the 21st of October or so, the ornamental stuff comes out, but there's also a bloom of wild witch hazel. And actually, if you have days where it's warm enough for bees to leave the colony in October, the end of October, or October 20th or so, next week sometime. They'll forage on it, and it's really interesting to see. And it's a very interesting phenomena. All right, so anything else? Well, the other thing that's actually blooming, or still like persistently blooming, is our my goldenrod in my area is still out, and it hasn't been harmed by any cool weather, and it's still producing nectar because I can smell it curing in the colonies. So, and I smelled it yesterday. I didn't bother today, but I know that up in our bee yard, our new bee yard up in Cheshire, in the Boulder Knoll Farm area, that goldenrod field looks brown, but it's actually it still has millions of blooms that are operational and producing nectar. And the bees up in that yard are bringing back pollen every day and nectar also. So, and those colonies are heavy. Is that right, Paul? Where's Paul? He lifted them all.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, he lifted them all. So all of those top boxes over there are, what would you say, Paul?
At least 50 to 60 pounds.
Yeah, so there's enough honey in them to get them through the winter. All right, so they will be tucked away in their winter garb pretty soon. I'll insulate all the tops heavily, and then I'll insulate the side boxes and put them in what I run my colonies in. We'll see what goes on. All right, any other thing? Well, let's see what.
Bill,
Yes.
I have a question about the aster.
Yeah, aster, white. That's what I was just going to say. White and blue wood aster are both still out. I think I haven't seen a lot of it this year, but I think it's still out.
Why is it that some beekeepers don't like aster in their hives?
The nectar has high glucose content.
So it goes to sugar faster.
It goes to crystallize faster.
Crystallize faster.
Yeah, there were people that there's beekeepers that get angry about about aster. Folks that made honey right here in Connecticut for right here in Cheshire for years. I mentored with somebody who started keeping bees in Cheshire during World War II, and he recently stopped keeping bees. But he was just if it was up to him, he would eradicate aster, because if you have a seed, if your honey supers are loaded with crystallized honey, and it happens on years occasionally, then that's the seed stock for next year's honey crop. So you end up with a couple of years of honey, if you're producing honey, that crystallizes quick. All right, it's like when you make creamed honey, you use a starter crystal of the right consistency, so you make that nice smooth creamed honey. So, but any kind of crystal or any kind of hard object inside of your honey will cause it to crystallize sooner. Bees will eat it out as crystallized honey. It doesn't hurt them, but they won't clean the cell completely. They leave a honeycombed kind of mess in there, but they'll fill it with honey the next season also if you reuse that super, and that's how the seed crystal gets in your next patch of honey. All right, so that's it in the long story piece. Okay. So, there's either questions in the chat already. We could go on to that. Wild aster, yes. Witch hazel, goldenrod, daisy. Oh, so an interesting phenomenon that Paul and I observed over at the bee yard. When was that? Last Saturday, Paul?
Last Friday.
Last Friday. Okay, last Friday. So that yard was started on a clear cut of mugwort, really dense mugwort. They gave us the property. They said, here, you could have as much as you want. We cleared out, I don't know, about a quarter of an acre or so, maybe. And I mowed it religiously to keep the mugwort from growing. Mugwort is easy to mow down after the first mowing. And then clover took over. And the clover Paul let it grow on one of the mowings that he did. And I've been like not mowing over the clover a whole lot. And it was blooming. White Dutch clover was blooming last Friday and the bees were working. So because of a consistent mowing and a new planting from it. I have no idea where this seed bank came from this year. It's just a total mystery to me that we had so much White Dutch clover around. And I've had folks say they thought it might have been blown, the seed might have been blown here by high winds but nothing actually, unless, I don't know, a plant pathologist has to be able to tell us what's going on there. But I'll ask somebody if I meet anybody who I think knows. But we had an incredible crop of clover this year, White Dutch clover, and it produced nectar. So it was kind of interesting. All right, cool.
So one question is, when do we take off our honey supers that are filled with funny honey?
What is funny honey? What are they talking about? What's funny honey?
I'm not sure unless he's talking about honey that's crystallized.
I don't understand the question, so you should have, well, your supers, if you still have supers on now in October.
Oh, there's his answer. Sugar water.
When do you take them off? What do you mean?
Well, your supers, you should not have sugar water in your supers, because that means you were feeding when you had your supers on, and you should not be feeding when you've got supers on.
Well, if you want to make honey, you can't feed with your supers on. If you want to leave those supers on for winter food for the bees, you have to understand the reason why you might be feeding liquid food, sucrose, and have honey supers on. If you didn't make honey, you made funny honey, as you said. And you could take that off anytime you want or leave it on. But you can't harvest it as honey. By the way, it tastes terrible. So you couldn't even pass it off as honey. So yeah. All right. So
I have a question, if I may, a couple of questions. One is, the second box, not the super, but is not really full. It's about 50% full by just lifting it up. Is that all right? And the second question is, do I need to insulate the hive? I said we have only one hive. And do I need to insulate? And if I do, when do I do that? And
well, I don't understand the first question.
So, my concern is there enough food for the bees to overwinter when there's only about 50% of the second? I'm still trying to remember the terms. First tier, second tier, third tier is a lot easier for me than thinking about it as super. The first tier
it will be quite difficult to reinvent the nomenclature.
I know. I have to learn. I have to learn. It's not been an easy thing.
I know. Yeah. So those are called deeps.
Deeps. Thank you. That's the word. So the first deep is fairly heavy. I didn't weigh it, but it's fairly heavy. The second deep is about half as heavy as the first one. Is that we have started giving them 2 to 1? Will that be sufficient to overwinter them?
Well, I have no idea what you mean by heavy. So okay. is there 5 frames in there, 6 frames?
No, there's 9 frames, and the frames are about 40 to 50% filled.
Yeah, so 9 frames, that would be okay. So 9 times 7, 63. So 63, half of that, 30 pounds of honey.
Probably.
No, that won't be sufficient to get them through the winter.
So we are giving them the 2
to 1
right
now.
Gotta
try to get a couple of gallons of syrup in them. Yeah.
Okay. So that's what we're doing now.
Yeah. Then you can put top insulation on anytime you want. You can put insulation on around the box. There's no have tos, but you can. And I would recommend it.
And styrofoam siding, would that work, or do you want to recommend something else?
Well, why don't you send me an email and I'll
Okay.
send you my articles on the subject. You
Okay, thank you, sir.
can read them, okay? Be easier. All right. What else we got here?
What is the best way to store frames of clean drawn comb over the winter?
Well, the best way to store them is freeze them first in the container you're going to store them in. So you could store them in like big construction black plastic bags. Put those in the freezer, and then you freeze the whole thing for 72 hours like that. Seal it up, and then take it out as a big Christmas present, and then it'll stay that way for a long time. So you can freeze them and do that, right? So that's one way. The other way is you can actually, at this point, start to stack them in some way outside, but you have to make sure that you don't have any wax moth activity in any of those frames. To every frame, you have to go through every single frame, make sure there's no wax moth activity. Then you could store them soon, beginning very soon. You probably won't get much wax moth activity from now until the end of the year. But to be safe, you should freeze them, and you can start to store them outside. I have a stack of about 20 mediums that I crisscrossed for a while. So meaning I put them down on a black mat that was sealed on the bottom so nothing can come in the bottom. Then I crisscrossed them all. Like I put them on, instead of line them up, I put them in 90-degree opposites all the way up. And it rained on all of that. Rain went through it all, and I don't know, everything got in it, leaves, all that stuff. So then I took it apart. I took those stacks apart, shook all the water out of the frames, and then stacked them up back right and put a cover on them, and they're fine. They'll be fine. So those are your options. You can store them outside. If you make conditions ideal for wax moths, even inside your house in the wintertime, you'll get infestation. If there are any eggs alive and you brought them in and you sealed them without freezing or something like that, you try to seal them up, the wax moth larvae will develop, the eggs will hatch, the larvae will emerge, and it'll work its way through your, whatever it is, your comb, and ruin it for you. So I hope that helps. I hope what folks have been storing comb in this venue here. So how about some other folks just chiming in and tell us what you do? Ralph, you had a plan. You used to do things. What did you used to do?
Pretty much what you just described. I would put things outside and wait for the frost to get them, but anything that comes inside goes through 2 days of freezing first.
Yeah.
When I first started, I used the PDB, the moth crystals.
Yes. Okay.
I don't use anymore.
Yeah, PDB is we've gotten away with that. 401k is a product you can also use. I wouldn't. So just to reiterate, just to clarify, Ralph, I can't remember the actual chemical PDP, but it's mothballs, right? Basically.
It's a kind of a mothball, para dibenzene something or other, and I just remember that wax being what's that? Not hydrophilic, but it wax sucks up things, and it would impregnate your wax if you use it. It'll protect.
It's lipophilic, and it's
lipophilic. That's
yeah.
the term, right? Lipophilic.
And it's an oil-based product.
And there are some BTs, I guess, that are. I've never used BT, but
well, that's the 401k. That's a BT.
Okay. Bacillus
thuringiensis. That's a bacteria that you spray. Bactericidal that you spray on an active bacteria that you spray on your comb. It's a little labor intensive, and it doesn't kill the larva until the larva starts to eat the comb, and then it grows inside the larva, the wax moth larva, and it just begins to destroy its insides, and it blows up. So it's a parasite. It's a parasite. It's an intercellular parasite for wax moth larvae. Now that formula, that 401k, that formula, that's what it goes under. There's other BTs that you can spray on your lawn outside for grubs, and there's a kind of BT or a bacterial side that you can spray underneath colonies for small hive beetle larvae. So it's a well-known larval side. All right, so
I-
that's the way you can do it.
Can I
Anything
just
else?
jump in for a sec, Bill?
Sure. Yep, Dean.
BT is used by vegetable gardeners on brassica, like broccoli and cabbages.
Yes.
It's perfectly safe.
Yep.
And it's an insecticide, but it's not like the other chemical insecticides. I used some of the stuff as a test that I use on my cabbages.
Yeah.
Sprayed on my frames, sprayed it on there, and they were absolutely fine. And I have a lot of problems with, I have a lot of wax moths here. I got a big forest in the back, and it's for some reason seems to be full of them.
Yeah.
But however, I do resort to the black bags freezer and store everything in the garage.
Okay, good. I mean, that's a foolproof way. Just don't want to make sure that you you have to handle that bag with care, because if you take it out and rip the corners open on the bag, you can get wax moth in it. But you have to have a pretty heavy infestation for anything to develop after you freeze it. I doubt it. If you freeze it for 2 days, the Food and Drug Administration says you have to actually freeze it for 72 hours to make sure, but I've never done that. I always do it for two days, 48 hours. And the literature supports 48 hours. So. Anybody else? I know that if Lauren Doninger was on here anywhere, she would say that you can buy these special comb storage boxes. She knows the name of them. I don't. And those are designed, they're very expensive, but they're designed to do exactly what we say, store comb and freeze them and store comb. Is she here?
Hive Butler.
Hive Butler. Yes, that's it. Hive Butler. So somebody can get up a picture of a Hive Butler. We can see it. And it's a kind of an interesting thing, costs a fortune, but it's worth it if you're going to save comb. I lost maybe 10 or 15 supers to wax moth this year where I storm. I didn't get around to using them for, I didn't get around to using this year. I didn't have a full super load on my production colony, so I didn't get around to using them. And what I did was, during my extraction in the honey house, for some reason, I put a wet super, a sticky, in my dry super column, and that attracted the moths, and they got into about 10 supers and ruined them. All right, there it is, the Hive Butler. Everybody see that? Yes. Can everybody see that? The Hive Butler?
Yes,
I see it.
Okay, great. Yeah, there it is. See that? It's all kind of cool. You put them in. I guess they take 10 frames. Each one of them takes 10. Hey, listen, you can store your comb in that, right? And then just in the spring, in the springtime, just drill a hole in it and run it as a colony. It'll be great, Shake a box of bees in that thing. Maybe you could do a purpose out of it. All right, so that's cool. Thank you so much. All right, the Hive Butler. I got to remember that, Shannon. How come I didn't know that? I don't know.
So
All right, what else?
can you talk a little bit about combining hives, weaker hive with the stronger hive? How best to determine which queen to save?
Well, I know right away which queen to save. You save the one in the stronger colony, unless there's some reason why that queen in the weak colony wasn't laying. But I don't think I would save the queen in the weak colony. And the idea of I mean, it's a good thing to do. I mean, for backyard beekeepers, you should do that. I mean, you should actually try to save your weak colony somehow and combine them with your strong colony. And there is a mitigating factor, and that is that it wasn't the queen in the weak colony that was the problem. There's been some science that supports this notion that it's not always the queen that's a problem. And there are times when it's the actual brood that's not cooperating with the queen. And for some reason, her offspring are not very good at being bees, and they keep her production down and everything else. And if you switched her and put her in another colony, she might perk up and be a fine queen. But I don't know how you would tell that unless you had lots of colony and lots of colonies, lots of time to figure that out. So I guess what I would do is I would just default to not saving the weaker queen, and I would requeen them I would combine them with the stronger colony. Any other suggestions about that? Mike, what would you do?
I generally don't combine hives,
Yeah,
because if one of them has an issue, you're just compounding the issue. And as opposed to keeping the best queen, sometimes the best queen is actually the best robber in the neighborhood.
you are like you're religious on that, Robin. You hate
Oh,
that.
I've actually caught like 300 robber bees in a hive a couple weeks ago. So
Did you get over it for this season, or no? Not really.
I don't know. I might have to liquidate somebody else's whole apiary
Apiary.
before this is over. But what I want to do is catch them and mark them and beeline them and find out which apiary they're actually coming from.
Okay, yeah,
And
yeah.
some colonies just naturally have a small cluster going into winter, not maybe the size of maybe a little smaller than a soccer ball. I almost want to say softball, but that's a little too small.
Yeah, that'll be a little bit too small. I mean, if you get below 5 frames and you're going to try to do a conventional wintering one, it gets a little difficult. So, but
Yeah.
anyway,
And
yeah. So, but like if there's so Michael's point is, and I failed to mention it, but he's right. You should make certain that there's nothing wrong with those colonies. Like if there's a malady in there, if you have a high. If that colony is weak and low because you haven't treated it for varroa, or there's a high varroa count in there, or a big viral load or something, then it wouldn't be a good idea to combine it with anything at that point. You might want to let it go somehow, or just let it try to survive, and the winter will take care of that. All right, anybody else?
So we have some more questions. I did a
Okay.
Formic Pro treatment on my hives recently, single strip, 20 days, but the strip never dissipated. Paper is still on and it was hard as a rock. I did get a significant mite drop on the whiteboard, but in past treatments, the strips are mostly gone. Does this happen sometimes? Does it mean there was a problem with the Formic Pro? It was not expired.
Well, if the Formic Pro did not gas out, the strip wouldn't be hard. The strip would be soft. So if the strips, if I'm hearing this right, I heard that the strips were hard as a rock. They have totally outgassed at that point. So they're spent, and they gave off whatever it is, whatever formic acid they gave off, they gave that off already. 20 days is a little bit long. That's fine. You can, Formic Pro is a 14-day treatment for a double pad. And they will, unless there's nothing you can do to make a mistake on the Formic Pro when you put it on, because if you just lay it on the colony the way you follow the instructions on the box and lay it on that colony that way, and it hardens, it has outgassed. So I'm not sure if I understand the question. Maybe somebody could come live and talk more about that.
It was really answered in the chat. People saying that exactly what you said, Bill, that's the result of a successful formic treatment.
Okay, all right.
Yes, that was my question, Bill, and I think I probably wasn't remembering what happened last year when I used it correctly. So
Okay, all right.
I think it was a senior moment, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, so it's getting late in the season for Formic Pro to really be a good miticide. Because it's so temperature sensitive, you have to get it. So you're getting those daytime highs in the range, and the higher the daytime temperature, the higher it is to the threshold temperature, which is, stated on the package. If you can keep it at the high side of that, then look, when you're in the 80s, that's when you're getting the most, in my opinion, most efficacious use of Formic Pro, because it's outgassing at a high rate. In 14 days, it'll be gone, and you'll get all the kill you can out of it. Right? If you're trying to run it in a 60-degree range, it just takes a lot longer to gas out, and maybe it won't be that effective. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm done with the treatments now. I did the single strip for each one in 10 days. That's why it was a 20-day treatment.
Oh, you did a single strip for 10 days. Oh, I thought you put 2 strips. Okay, yeah. A single strip for that amount of time. You did the right thing then.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I just, for some reason, I didn't remember what happened when I did a Formic Pro last year, but I got a lot of mites on the board, so
All right.
good thing.
That's great.
Thank you.
All right. Cool.
So maybe Michael Hilligan Santa can speak up and ask his question. I'm not sure I understand it. He lost a 2-story deep hive. He says he thought he caught it in the beginning 5 days ago and reduced the opening, but I'm not sure what
He's talking about robbing, I think.
I don't know how to make them. Can't breathe loud. The lungs are fine.
All right, you're cut.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, hello, can you folks hear me?
Yeah, we can hear. Yeah, we can hear somebody. Is that Michael?
Great. Yeah, this is Mike. Sorry about that. Yeah, I got robbed completely in the past 5 days. I thought I caught it probably, what's today? Thursday. I thought I caught it maybe say Monday, and I reduced the opening. I put grass in one of the holes. They kicked the grass out, so I closed it down completely. The next morning I found it completely open. They pushed it open on me, and so I kind of closed it back up. But I have a faint feeling, I lost before I ever even got to it, because I opened it up today and just thinking that maybe I've starved the bees out or something, and it was just completely gone, like sucked clean dry. It was insane. I've never seen that before. Then again, I haven't been doing bees that long.
Yeah. So see what it is. So see, there's Michael Lund's worst nightmare, and it happens now and then. But that was probably a weaker colony going in, Michael.
Yeah.
And that's why it got robbed out. A normal colony that has a 3-inch opening or whatever would usually be able to defend the colony. Well, in the case of the colonies I'm fortunate enough to have this year, most of the colonies here are 10 seams of bees. So there's nobody's going to come in and rob those colonies. So it might have had something going on.
Okay.
So you're done with that colony.
Yeah, I'm done with that colony. I just, maybe I should just ask the question, should I always keep a reducer on even during the summertime?
Well,
Because maybe that was not my
yeah,
problem.
I
That was my
usually
problem.
so yes, you can use a reducer. You don't need to have a full open bottom on it. That's about 3 times as much space as the colony actually needs. And then they remember, then they have to defend that space.
Sure.
So yeah, you can actually run a robber screen all year if you want also.
Yeah.
Which would mitigate against robbing, but but that colony's pretty much gone at this point. There's nothing left in it, right? No brood.
No,
nothing.
yeah. No
Real
brood,
jagged
nothing.
edges on all of the combs.
Yeah, they literally,
they rob it. Yeah.
they robbed it blind.
Yes.
They did a really good job.
Severe robbing, you'll see bits of comb
Yeah,
on the landing.
out in the front.
Yeah.
Yep,
out in
on the
front.
bee board.
Yeah. You just
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time.
Cool. Sorry that happened, man.
Yep.
you know.
Bill, your comment about leaving robbing screens on, I remember, Tom Seeley's research showed what a natural bee tree cavity opening is like, and I've always thought about emulating that for my openings on my hives.
Like what?
Well,
Explain that.
2 inch, I think it's a 2-inch square is what his research showed.
Yeah, the 2-inch square, which I think it was 1.5-inch circle. Was what he showed, like, so 2 inches is probably the same. That's probably the same size. I don't really know, but I know that a 3-inch opening, a 3-inch by 3/4 opening, is about the right size for a natural opening, and so you can actually do it that way if you want. Also, yeah, I mean.
The bees are kind of weird sometimes too. I've had bees chew up my entrance reducer. Let me share something with you.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yep. I don't do that. See that? Yeah, no, those bees hit a strong flow. I mean, did you have that colony in my area, Jose, or was that your area?
No, that's my area. I mean, look at this. They look at how much wood they chiseled out of that. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, no, they'll do that. Yeah, I mean, I've seen that happen before. Yeah, I've seen that.
Are you sure that wasn't a mouse?
Well, no, that's not a mouse. No.
No, no mouse.
No, that's not a mouse. A mouse will make one really jagged hole. See how nice and round that is? The bees did that. Now, this year we ran a top bar hive at our bee yard all year. Very successful colony, big population, and they did that to the entrance. They chewed the entrance open because it wasn't big enough for them. And so, yeah, bees will do that. They'll chew it open sometimes.
So the next question is, what about how do you store frames that still have some nectar or uncapped honey in them?
I spin those out, and then I don't store them that way. You can freeze them and store them that way, if you want. And so you can do that same thing, freeze them in the bag and store them. You can do exactly the same thing. But I like to spin that all out, and then just have a sticky and then feed the sticky back, but you're way past the time. Well, actually, you might not be way past the time, but you might be able to get one cleaned out at this point. But you have to have a real strong colony to put it on. Spin it out, put it on the colony, let them clean it out. They'll do it in a day. Sometimes they'll do it overnight. If there's a dearth, they'll do it right away. But if there isn't, of course, they won't bother too much with it. But yeah, you can put it on there. Ralph likes to put it above the hole, the porter bee escape hole. I know. I put them on right on the colony as if they were going to make honey. I do it that way. I put a queen excluder on, then put it on, because I don't want the queen to get up there and start laying in it, because that's very attractive to queens for some reason, a wet honey super. So so that's the way I do it. I spit them out, try to get them cleaned by the bees, and then put them away for storage after I freeze them.
And what do you do with
the woods?
Yeah, you do your woods trick. You still do that, Ron?
Yeah, I just did it a few weeks ago. I had some frames that were, mostly a little bit of nectar. I wasn't going to put them in a hive. I put them in the woods away from the apiary, and they cleaned them out in a day.
Yeah. The only caution you have to take with that is if you have a lot of neighbors around and stuff like that. I mean, this time of year, I'm not so concerned with spreading disease and anything like that, but you can, of course, you have to be careful. And I don't particularly do that, but it will get the colonies clear, but it'll also get the bees into a robbing mode, and they'll start flying around your house looking for things that they can take from you, and they'll fly around your neighbor's house and look at things they can take from them. So, you got to be careful if you do it that way, that you're not really provoking a little robbing scenario in the rest of the neighborhood. They go after all kinds of stuff. They fly around the house and do all kinds of things. So I'd rather keep them from doing that. And I just feed back the stickies on top of the colonies. It avoids that issue, but people do it another way.
And what do you do with frames that are infested with wax moth damage? Are they cleanable or should I throw them out?
Throw them out. That's one thing. Mouse urine and extensive damage by wax moths are something that the bees are not likely to take kindly to. Now, if it's a plastic foundation, you can just scrape it back with a putty knife and get all of that junk out of there. If it's wired frame, it's trash. You can, of course, take the wires out and wire in foundation, more plastic. I don't even know how many folks, I'd like to take an informal survey, folks who are actually wiring in wax foundation these days, heating the wires, burning them in and all of that, or stretching them and rolling them in with a roller. I mean, I just don't hear a lot of beekeepers doing that these days. I think lots of folks are using, I don't know what, I really don't know the answer to this. I think a lot of people are using plastic foundation. I'm not sure, but anyway.
Would storing frames in a cedar chest work?
No, it doesn't. That won't help. The kind of moths that eat wool are not the same as a wax moth, but I don't think that I think a cedar chest would have an openings that wax moths can get into. Cedar chests would repel wool-eating moths, but I'm not sure if a wax moth is the same thing. I don't think it is. Well, I know it's not. There's different species, so maybe wax moths like cedar. I don't know. But I wouldn't depend on it. I would still say I default to the old school, freezing them out.
We are first-year beekeepers. Should we wrap our hives this winter? Amazon sells them for $50 each. Do we really need to spend that much money?
Amazon?
Amazon sells wraps for $50 each.
Oh, okay. So I would encourage you to consider like doing something that less than $50, like put together. Well, actually, I don't know if you can, but the wraps, so it's such a generic thing. Like, I don't have any idea what you're talking about. Wraps from Amazon, could be anything. It could be terribly ineffective, a total waste of money. So I can't really answer that question intelligently unless I knew exactly what it is you were trying to buy. It's not like a formulaic thing. It's nowhere near formulaic. It's specific. You have to make a covering that works, and you can get the materials at the Home Depot. You use a dense polystyrene, an EPS or EXPS, and that polystyrene will be cheap, and you can cut it into into the squares that you need and wrap it around your colony. There's plenty of examples of that. Read my articles in bee culture and just search out wintering colonies. My name will come up. You read my bee culture article. It gives you all kinds of instructions on how to build that sleeve, and you can do it economically.
Bill, can I jump in for a sec? Sorry.
Sure, of course, Dean.
On Amazon, the wrap type stuff that I see there is like the bee cozies.
Oh, bee cozies, yeah.
Yeah. And so I love these things. I use these for the first 3 years of beekeeping. Yeah. And then eventually they kind of got a little old and soggy and they wouldn't stay upright. So I tried tucking them in at the top, and that was disastrous. I have abandoned those completely, and now I'm back to tar paper and styrofoam.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So the important insulation is the important part of insulation, as Dean's mentioned, is that top insulation. Heat rises, and what's good about top insulation is it keeps the surface right above the bee's cluster, above the dew point, so no liquid water drains back down on the bees. This is a really interesting subject to research. And I haven't found any, I don't know what the R value of a bee cozy is, probably R5 or something like that. the idea is to make sure and certain that if you're not going to make a condensing colony out of, which is a completely different thing, and we were not talking about that tonight because we don't have enough time to talk about that. But if you were going to make a, if you just want to make certain that your colonies have some insulation, it's top insulation as much as you can. If you want to put 2 inches of EPS on there, that would be great. You just have to make certain that it doesn't blow off during the winter time. So anyway, cool.
Have you ever adopted your insulation design to allow for adding sugar boards? This
Well, yeah,
person had
yeah,
a
my-
hive eat through their stores in late winter, and they'd like to know what you recommend for the amount of honey in pounds to overwinter a strong colony.
So I don't have to modify my winter design because it's already incorporated. A feeding screen's already incorporated in it. Again, that article is in Bee Culture. Somebody, Dean, would you mind searching that and putting a link up there? So you can just read it, and it gives you all the instructions on how to make a sleeve, and it also has it has a feeding screen built into it. Over the winter time, I do my preparations during the year and in fall for my feeding of the colony. So I only feed them in the wintertime if I have to. I don't put on emergency food unless I need it. But that hasn't been the trend for beekeepers. Beekeepers, I'm going to go out on a limb and think, from what I'm hearing, anecdotally anyway, that beekeepers do something different. They want to have a safety net. So they want to actually winter with food on. But I'm going to guess that if your colony is properly prepared for the winter, and maybe you have 50 or 60 pounds of honey on a super above your brood nest or with your brood nest, either way, if you have 50 pounds of honey or 60 pounds of honey somewhere in that colony, that's sufficient to overwinter that colony. Actually, it will not take 50 pounds to get your colony through the winter. If you look at the numbers, the science supports, you only probably need about 30 pounds of honey for the actual metabolic use and thermoregulation of the colony. And so that's so, but I'm not suggesting you go in with 30 because I would have no idea how you've prepared that colony for the winter. Like, again, there's no formula for it. Everything has to be right. In other words, the colony has to be healthy. You're going to put some insulation on it and so on and so forth. And then it'll work. 50 pounds or 60 pounds of honey will be fine. You'll find 20 pounds left over, or maybe not 20, but you'll find 14 pounds left over in the spring, or maybe even 28 pounds left over in the spring, or 21 pounds. So they never use all of the honey. I've never seen a colony that had a box, a full deep super of honey on top of it, or even a 70% full, use that entire box. If they did, they died in March, because so and by the way, a big strong colony needs more food to get through the winter than a smaller one. So about 6 or 7 frames is the ideal size. There's an ideal size for wintering. And then if you get 10 frames and going into the winter, large populations of bees, it stands to reason that those bees will need more food to get through. But they thermoregulate more efficiently. So there's a little trade-off there.
I want to move to single deep hives, or maybe just using mediums due to physical limitations. What would be the best configuration?
Well, for mediums, it would be 3 mediums would be the best configuration for that. And what was the other one? Single hives is a single hive. It's just a single deep you'd have to use. You can overwinter single deeps. That occurs. Occurs in my yards regularly. And I also overwinter nukes. I've got a YouTube video on building a winter nuke box. And I just recently looked at it, and it has 3,000 views. So it's getting some, and there's quite a few subscribers to it. So It's a popular video. Go take a look at it on YouTube. You'll see it there. It's called Wintering Nucleus Colonies. And I'm there featured in it. I go through the entire process of how you could stack nukes next to each other in a box and winter them that way. So there's lots of different ways to winter bees. So, but a single box is fine. You can winter them that way. I always put insulation on top of those. You can, and I never, and they're, you know, if they're good and strong and healthy, when they're going into fall, like right now, so they've got a decent population, they've got food stores in there, and they'll survive.
And how do you transition to a single deep when you've got multiple deeps, or you've got supers on top of that?
Yeah, no, that you don't, yeah, you got to run them that way all year. So you got to run your single. I wouldn't, oh, you mean going forward? How do you do it? Well, you can go, if you mean going forward, how do you can do it? You can start in the spring. You're only going to have one deep of bees. That's all you'll have. I mean, unless you don't pay attention till April or May, when you might have a brood nest in both boxes at that point. You know, you can catch it early in April. Well, I'm talking about maybe if you don't get to it till May, early in April, depending on the bees and how the bees build in your area, you'll have time in the spring to move down to one box. And then what you would do is you'd have all your brood down in that one box, and then you'd put a queen excluder on. That's what I do, put a queen excluder on, then a super on top of that, a medium.
Yeah, that's the way it's already set up, Bill. So I just was wondering if, you know, to reduce them down to overwinter them in just a single deep, does just put on a bee escape and work them down there?
You mean they're in your super? There are.
No, right now the configuration is it's a deep with a queen excluder on top of it and then a super on top of that.
And what do you want to do? Harvest the super?
No, I just was gonna see about reducing them down to the deep for the winter and insulate up that.
What are you going to do with that super you take off?
I'm thinking from what I've seen so far, there's not much stores up there right now anyway. So I just put it off to the side.
Okay, so then you don't have much of a problem. So you can go right to that single.
Right.
You just take the super off and the queen excluder and put on insulation in the top cover.
Okay.
But you got to make sure you might want to feed that thing out a little bit.
I'm feeding them.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
So
I'm trying to see if they'll build up, but.
Yeah, well, you got to stop feeding them with the super on because they might be putting it in there, you know. So,
okay. Yep.
So you want that down in that deep if you're going to overwinter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I cheated a little bit at the bee yard this year. I started running everything as single deeps with a queen excluder, but I didn't have mediums to put on for honey. So I put drawn comb in deeps on them and they filled them. So then in my case, I thought, okay, let me just take the queen excluders off and plop that box back down. And that's what we did. We took all of the queen excluders out and just put that 60 or
If you
70.
struggle to fully empty your bladder, it means that your prostate is so swollen that it's making it impossible for you to pee more than just a few drops at a time.
Did we just get banged? Did we just get slammed there? What happened?
I think that was Mr. Lund.
Michael's on a medical call.
Okay.
That
Yeah.
was funny.
That's a bitch, man. You know, I mean, people get stung for that. You know, get stung for that. I'll help. All right. So
Bill, let
So
me
the next
mention something about apropos of the person who just had the question. I had an interesting dilemma this year. You know, I've built those insulating sleeves similar to yours, and so they're good for a 2 deep winter configuration.
yeah.
I had 2 deeps and a shallow on these hives, and I said, well, what am I going to do? I can't insulate using that sleeve. I'm not going to rebuild it. So I ended up doing is I ended up taking off the shallows that had honey in them, put them on another hive, and then I figured, well, now I just took 33 pounds of honey off of that hive.
Yeah.
So I ended up putting my hive top feeders on, and I fed both those hives about 4 gallons of 2 to 1 each.
Nice.
And now I'm good to go. I can use the
Yeah.
sleeves and just close it up for the winter.
Here you go. Yeah. So you can make that kind of transition. Yeah. Very nice. Well done.
When should you stop feeding syrup with the consistent daytime? Would that be consistent daytime or nighttime temperatures of 55 to 57?
Yeah. So again, like you have to stop feeding when the bees no longer take it down. All right. So it's really observational. So like if my discovery in the whole thing over years of doing this is that when I have a top feeder on a colony and I have an insulated top above that top feeder, I get a lot of use out of that top feeder. I can go all the way through October feeding. So before the bees won't be able to break cluster and come up. If the nighttime, if you're getting daytime temperatures that are in the 40s, the bees are in cluster. Sometimes they'll come up in that if you have a, or if let me say, if they're in the 50s and 60s, the bees will come up into that feeder, especially if it's insulated on top. If it gets down to where the bees have to maintain cluster, they won't come up to any feeder. They won't even go over to division board feeders at that point. So the only way there's not really any significant way to feed the bees. You have to feed them a little bit earlier than this. Like you have to start your feeding. Well, I guess you could still feed them for another week or two, but they might.
One other thing I do, Bill, to help that out, in addition to putting the insulation on top, I just put the gallon feeder right on top of the frames. I do not use an inner cover and put the gallon feeder on.
You're feeding in a different way.
Yeah, I'm feeding a different way. I just put that gallon feeder right on top of the frames.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a different way to do it. So you can do it that way. There you go.
Should the queen stop laying soon? I went into my hives on Sunday. They both had quite a bit of capped brood as well as various stages of larvae.
Yeah, no, your queens have not stopped yet. And they'll stop. And if they've got cap, so, well, Paul and I were observing this in our bee yard last Friday. And there's total full frames of brood in those colonies. And yeah, so they're still banging out brood. And there was drones, there was everything. It looked like it was summertime. So yeah, so that's sort of an individual thing. When the pollen stops coming in, my guess is that you won't see any more brood rearing at that point, because there won't be any protein for the nurse bees to make brood food out of. So I'm saying probably 21 days from the time, I can't remember exactly what we figured out, maybe 25 or 30 days or something from last Friday, assuming the queen's not laying, but I saw eggs in almost every colony. Yeah, so it could be till the end of October. So it might even be a few weeks in November when there's still brood in some colonies. By the end of November, I'm almost certain you'll see your queens have stopped laying and there's no brood. But you tell me when that happens. I'll look at, I'll let you know what happens at the bee yard where I saw my own colonies, my own production colonies still have brood too. It was just a great year in my area. So, and they haven't stopped, and this goldenrod flow is not going to keep bees, it won't stop bees from queens from laying. They'll continue to lay. Now, wait a minute, Paul, did we see any colonies that didn't have any brood in them at all?
No.
Yeah, so there was every colony had brood.
Every colony had lots of brood. In fact, you're right about the drones. I was surprised to see the drones there this late.
Yeah. So, yeah, nobody's getting thrown out of the colonies. See what happens. That's not usually a good sign, but because there's so much brood going in. But that's a group of winter bees. I mean, if it works out like it's working out for colonies around my area at this point, the ones that I'm managing and looking at, it's an ideal year where you would have all of this big crop of winter bees coming on board with no brood at all to service. And what they'll be diurnus bees. What they'll do is they'll turn in, they won't use any of their fat stores to make any kind of brood food. So they go into winter with all of the nutrients they need to stay alive and healthy all winter long. That's what winter bees are. They're bees, they're just plain old nurse bees that haven't had to use their stores to make food for other bees because there aren't any. So, and when that occurs, they live longer. When they're during the summertime, when they're actual nurse bees, they're using all of their fat bodies up to make brood food, even though they're also consuming pollen to make other brood food. They still have to use all of their fat bodies. When they do all of that, when those are all done, they become foragers. You know, when they lose all of that, all of their fat bodies, and then they, and then that's the end of their life. But in the wintertime, especially now, with all the brood coming on in the colonies I'm seeing, those will have no choice but to be winter bees, because the pollen flow's got to stop in the next, I would say, 10 days. There'll be no more pollen left for bees to gather in. Not insignificant numbers that will support brood, in my opinion. So they might find something at a nursery, or some witch hazel, or maybe some straggling goldenrod, or maybe even aster. I don't know how much pollen they get out of aster. You know, so that's the situation.
My bees did not cap the fall honey crop. First time in 4 years. Any idea why?
Well, yeah, I know why. Because they don't really invest a lot in capping fall honey. So bees, that doesn't mean that that's not dry honey in those cells. So what I do is I take a little toothpick and then jiggle it around in a, first of all, I try to shake the frame, and see if any nectar comes out. And if none does, you can almost tell it's honey by looking at it. So what fall honey in a cell has a dull gloss to it. If it looks really wet, it's not honey yet. But if it has that dull gloss, it's almost honey. Now, the way you have to be able to figure that out is use a refractometer. So I take a toothpick, spread a cell or two. So I see if, when I used to harvest my fall crop, I don't do that anymore. When I used to harvest my fall crop, I would find frames that were 60% capped and 40 open, or the other way, 60 open and 40 capped. And I would just toothpick it out, put it on my refractometer, and get a moisture reading on it. And lots of times it might have been a little higher, but it wasn't, it never affected the crop. In other words, it would bring the crop to, you know, a few percentage points higher than if it was all capped, but it was still great honey, staying in the 18.5 or my fall crop always used to come in wet, you know, so I don't do fall crop. So yeah, so they, you know, to cap frames with honey, they got to produce wax, and producing wax takes high temperature. So they have to get that brood temperature up. They have to get that colony temperature up. The area where they're making wax has to be warm for their wax glands to work and make wax to cap cells. And they're not going to steal wax, old wax from other places to cap honey this time of year. So they just don't do it. But it doesn't mean that it's not honey. So you have to have a refractometer to figure that out. Now, that will be, by the way, the first honey they consume when they go into cluster. Right? They don't have to get back in there and uncap anything, because that stuff is ready to go. So it could be a biological adaptation too, but I've never read anything about it on the in the literature that bees are smart enough to say, let's leave this stuff uncapped because we're going to be using it right away. You know, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Is it too early to insulate, or should I wait till November?
Okay, so I mean, I think we might have answered that. It's never too early to insulate. You can insulate anytime you want. Insulation never does any harm in a colony. You can run as much insulation you want in your colony all year long. It doesn't matter. It won't, you know, there's this old mythology and there's bee lore And I've heard people that I thought knew a lot about beekeeping say that if you insulate your colony too early, or if you insulate it too long in the springtime, it has this deleterious effect on the colony. Absolutely untrue, right? If you think about the way bees naturally, their natural habitat was full of insulation all around the colony, an infinite amount below the colony and an infinite amount above in a tree cavity where they're naturally adapted to live. So no, insulation has no effect on it. People will tell you all kinds of crazy things, but it's not true. As a matter of fact, they have a lot of insulation around them anyway, once they put up frames of honey. If you'll notice that your bees build their honey frames from the outside to in the wintertime, and they're doing that intentionally. That's a biological adaptation to put up frames of honey on the outside, because honey has a very, very high thermal coefficient, and it resists heat change, and so it's a lot of insulation just to begin with. All right, so yeah, no formula for that. You can put it on. I leave my hive tops insulated all year long, because insulation works both ways. I mean, if you have really hot summer days and you've got heat pounding down on the top of your colonies have to deal with that. You know, they have to thermoregulate in the summertime, just like they have to thermoregulate in the winter. So insulation works to their advantage in the summertime also. Right, allowing them to keep
Dean, would you like to expound on your overwintering question?
I will. I have one of those Michael Palmer resource hives that's like, it's split down the middle. So it's 8 frames and 8 frames, 4 on 4.
Oh, 8 and 8 or 4 and 4?
So it's 4 on 4.
Yeah. So it's 4 on 4. Yeah.
Yep. And I've had it for years. I always go into winter with like colonies on both sides, and they sort of snuggle together and keep each other warm.
Yeah.
I love it. It's fantastic. I had a queen emergency 3 weeks ago and lost a queen after some Formic Pro issues. And I did what I meant to, which is to take that little colony that I've got there and use it to like requeen the big colony. Now I'm going into winter and I've got only 1 colony.
You're missing a colony.
Yeah. And I'm like, do I try and put him in a single deep? Do I stuff the thing full of burlap for insulation? Like, any thoughts on what I should be doing?
Yeah, what I would do there is, because you're insulating those things, right?
Oh, yeah, of course.
So what I would do is I would cut a little bit of EPS and I'd put it in the bottom of that, way down on the top of the bottom nuke that's got the empty position on it. You follow that? So I'd push it all the way down and then just do whatever you do normally. So in other words, make it 3 colonies. You're going to do you insulate the top?
Yes, I just insulate the top. It's normally only got 2 colonies in it and they're side by side. So you're saying insulate here and here?
Yeah, over the top of the live colony. Down below.
The problem I have is that the live colony is like 4 frames and then 4 frames. And if I try and put insulation at this midpoint, the lid won't sit flat. Because the lid goes across both
okay,
boxes.
all right, I misunderstood it. Yeah, okay, yeah.
You see what I'm saying? But like,
Yes,
I should just insulate it, right?
I usually just insulate it, yes.
Okay, I will do that. Thank you.
And yeah, the space won't make any difference.
Can I ask another question?
Sure.
Sorry. I am, as you know, I don't see fantastically well, and I have trouble seeing eggs, and that doesn't normally matter. However, I recently realized and then checked up that bee eggs fluoresce under UV light. What are your thoughts on using UV light for bee inspections?
I will try that and then let me know what happens, because I really like that idea.
Okay, I will do.
I think that's a great thing to bring forward, and I hope it works, because that would be something that yeah. So by the way, there's lots of UV reflection going on in the bee world. And another one, just briefly, another one is when bees mate, when queens mate, and the drone has inserted his endophallus, he falls backward and it snaps off. And that gives off a burst of UV light, which the other drones that are following that queen that want to mate her see, and it gives them directional signal for where she is. Right. So there's lots of stuff that goes on with UV light. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if they shine like little diamonds in the bottom of the cell.
Well, that's kind of why I asked the question, because like there's a world in which I might damage the eggs, but there's also a
No,
world
no,
where
not what, no, yeah.
upset all the other bees. Like I don't want to be like pissing them off.
Yeah, you'll probably piss them off, but try it anyway. You know, the other thing you can do is you can try infrared. You know, you can put a, but I don't know if you could, you know, you can put an IR camera on them. So if you just wiped over, you see, UV light takes a while to disinfect and kill stuff, you know, so.
Right. Yeah. I'm just looking to be able to see a flash in the bottom of the cell, because
That's all, yeah.
Yeah. I'll give it a go. I'll let you know.
Yeah.
I'd be very interested in that because I have a lot of difficulty finding the eggs, and our mentor keeps saying, there they are. And I'm going, where?
Well, in your case, Nori, you can take a photograph of them with your the frames with your camera, come back in the house later on. Make sure you're using you're accommodating for that little tilt that's in the eggs. It's 13-degree tilt or whatever it is. I mean, we love to throw around numbers like we know everything about bees, but the reality is that we don't really. And so there's a kind of a tilt to it. And just to let you in on a little secret, and Jose will say I'm getting professorial. How do you say that? Professorial, right? Okay, because he's a lawyer, you know, so he knows those. But not the bees do not.
Now, why did you have to say that?
I don't know.
I was like, I have trouble enough making friends. And
I know. I'm sorry, I didn't.
We love you, Jose.
We love you. We love you.
Son of a bitch.
He's not a normal lawyer. Wait a minute. I don't know.
That's true.
That isn't coming out right either. I don't know. No. So anyway.
Wire ahead.
Yeah. So anyway, so the bees build. If you look at natural colonies, you'll notice, and Michael London, I saw this firsthand in the one colony I had the pleasure of having Mike's help and guidance cut open many years ago in a log, that bees build comb at all different angles, and sometimes it's flat out straight, sometimes it has an angle to it, you know, so don't go by that. But anyway, what I was going to get at, Nori, is that you make certain that you're taking your photograph down at the bottom of the cell. There's a little Mercedes symbol down there. Go down there and look at it when you do your photograph.
What is the portable UV light source?
I don't know.
Oh,
He's going to figure that out.
Looks like a big. It looks like a big backlight.
You just look for blacklight, like go all CSI.
Yeah, it's a black light. It's not actually UV. I mean, it is, but it goes through a filter. You can't, because you can't, like, you know, you can't be looking at UV light. Yeah, it's not a good thing. I put a UV when I panicked during the COVID thing, and I fitted my ductwork with UV lighting, and it's for disinfectant reasons, and it chewed out my filter, so it's dangerous. UV lighted my furnace filter, chewed it out. So anyway, that's a side. What do we got?
Hey, I hate to admit why I know this, but you can get a portable UV light, probably in Amazon, because if you have a problem with cats urinating in your house, it will fluoresce. And they sell little battery operated ones to find that.
Okay, there you go. So there it is. I didn't know that. Thanks, Kurt.
They're less than $10.
I just ordered one for $11 on Amazon. So.
Somebody is famous is flashing one there.
Yeah.
Somebody's got one?
Yeah, it's right there.
All right. So look, well, listen. So
now the other thing that people could do is, you know, to download an app on your phone like this one.
Oh, yeah.
And that can help you sometimes. That magnifies what you're looking at, and it also comes with built-in light. So it really lights up what you're looking at, magnifies it, so it helps you to see much better. This is Android. I don't know what's out there for the iPhone, but this is helpful for some.
Okay, cool. So you can get a magnifying glass. I have one on mine. Apple comes with one, but I bought one too for $2.99 or something like that. But I'm really curious about this this UV thing, and I'm gonna order one of those little babies when we get off of here.
I
And
feel bad. I'm going to create a run on UV light.
You're
by
gonna
asking
create a
question,
run.
and I apologize.
Good. No,
I hope it works, but yeah.
No, but who knows if it works? It doesn't matter. It's only $11, and we'll know at that point. But yeah, there's a protein in cat urine. I'm sure that's what it's fluorescent off of, and cool. You feed your queen something that makes her eggs fluoresce. That would be nice too.
Pretty much any protein will.
Any protein will fluoresce, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. All right. What else we got?
We're caught up with questions, so if folks want to ask anything, please speak up.
All right. We're out of questions.
How long should we be feeding? This is the first year. So how long should we be feeding the bees?
Well, like we had in this conversation, you can only feed them till they won't take it anymore. So you can feed them as long as you want under the circumstances that we discussed here, like whether or not you have a top feeder and insulated cover, and it's the matter of feeding them while they can still break cluster and come up to whatever feeding source you have, and still take the syrup down.
Thank you.
So there's a convection current that occurs in liquid sucrose. And what ends up occurring if you have a jar with punched holes in them over the top of your porter bee escape hole, and then you put another empty box on top of that, and then a top cover, keep all the robbers out and everything. That current will always be, that syrup will always be coolest at the bottom and warmest at the top. So it works a little different than a feeder like a hive top feeder. When the bees can get up through the opening in the center and then find their way to the screen, they're eating the warmest syrup in there, right? Because the syrup on the top of a top feeder is warmer than the syrup on the bottom. All right, does that make sense? Right,
it makes sense. So we're just having the regular feeders that are in the sit in the hive. Is that okay to use that for the 2-to-1, or that you
can put 2-to-1 in anything. You can put honey in it. You can put 2-to-1. Yeah, 2-to-1 is fine. Yeah. By the way, that reminds me, don't feed your colonies honey unless you know it came out of your colonies. You can't feed them honey. All honey has American foul brood spores in it mostly, and but you never know where that honey came from, and if it came from a colony that was infested with American foul brood. And it's possible because we have a lot of imported honey, and we have a lot of domestic honey that might be, harvested from failing colonies. And it might not even be that the beekeeper knows they're failing, so be cautious. Don't feed any honey from a colony that you don't know the source of. All right, what else we got?
Hey, Bill, I'd like to offer a counter to insulating hives. And this is why, at least I adopted this early on. And the theory is that the bees, their cluster insulates the center of that cluster. And the bees on the outside are somewhat sacrificial, but they don't necessarily let them die, but they get to the point where they're almost frozen. And what they do is they draw in those bees to the center to rewarm them. And it's this constant, revolving of who's on the outside. But I have not insulated my hives in the 5 years that I've been keeping and been very successful overwintering.
Mm-hmm.
But what is important is insulating the top.
So you're not really countering anything. And by the way, your theory about how bees move in the mantle has never been verified by science. As a matter of fact, the opposite is true. So what's occurring is that the bees that migrate from the mantle to collect moisture in the center You have to know the dynamics of thermal regulation to understand that. And so the bees have been studied very, very carefully, and the science is very clear on it. And guys like Derek Mitchell and guys like Tom Seeley have been trying to educate us about not thinking about bees doing exactly what you said. They get cold on the outside of the mantle, then they come in and warm up. That's just not the case, right? So, what you can do is you can read you can read some of the more current science about what we know about thermal regulation and the way the bees exchange energy and use carbon dioxide and all that in the center of that cluster is very interesting, but it's nowhere near what you're suggesting, right? So, but that's what we used to think, and I agree that we thought that, the bees are signaling somehow, and they want to get in and get warm, but no, it's just not. That's not the way it works. So, so you're not really countering anything if you're insulating the top of the colony. You're doing the same thing, and you're not preventing any of that. Even if that were occurring, you're not preventing that by putting insulation all around and on top of the colony. So it doesn't really matter. And for folks that are backyard beekeepers and they want to do a little something to keep their colonies alive, they're not doing anything, irregular. They're not trying to produce honey or sell nukes in the springtime. A little bit of added insulation on them is a good thing for them, in my opinion.
Getting back to the not seeing eggs well and whatnot, Peter favors this, and this actually can work well too. So I just thought I'd share that so people could see just another tool that they can use. It's a head visor magnifier. Also, Kathy has a 3-inch slit in the front of
You mean like this?
Something like that.
Has a little light on it. Yeah. And that'll fit under your veil. And you'll be able to do it.
So Kathy has a 3 in the front of the top board, the inside cover. I think she might mean the inner cover. She wants to know how to plug that up for the winter.
So somebody stepped on the end of that. What was it?
It's a 3-inch slit. It is the inner cover. It's kind of a Langstroth fifth, but it was custom made, and that's what it came with. So how do I plug that little 3-inch slit that high up? And it looks like
it's an inner cover.
Yes.
And it has a little slit in it.
Yeah, Roberta mentioned. I think I have to flip it and see if then the top cover will cover it up, if the outer cover will cover it over. Any other thoughts? Do I put aluminum foil in if I can't close it off, or how do I plug it?
So any of the insulated, any of the inner covers that I had that had a little slot on, I just put a little piece of wood in there.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Cover them up. You can put almost anything in there, a little piece of insulation, not fiberglass insulation, but a little bit piece of
blue stuff,
foam insulation or something like that, just to keep that out of there. Get that out.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And thanks, Roberta.
Yeah.
And the last question we got is from Patricia. She has an insulated cover. Should I add additional insulation?
You can put as much as you want on that insulated cover. What kind of insulated cover do you have, Patricia? Like one from Bee Smart or something?
Yes, I have one from Bee Smart.
Yeah. Did I give that to you at one of the? No.
No, I actually got that when I bought a thing from Farmington people. I'm sorry, I'm gapping out. I'm bad.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can put an inch. So you're going to have a little bit of a problem. You don't want to use in my opinion, you shouldn't use the Bee Smart cover over the winter time if you're going to use there. And you have to make sure that with the Bee Smart insulated inner cover, you have to make sure that it's actually sitting down on the top of the frame. Paul and I noticed this at the bee yard last. I don't use them, but I was given some, so I'm trying them out. And they have little plastic pegs that you have to get in the corners of each colony, and it indexes that inner cover just perfectly over the top. Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, if you flip that over, it would have little pegs that sit on the corners. And if they're not perfectly aligned, it bows the cover and it lets a bunch of cold air in all around the seam. So that doesn't make any sense. I mean, the bees will propolize it shut eventually, which would help. But so check and make sure that's not happening. Now you can add, this is designed so you can put a regular, what you were looking at is designed so you can put a regular telescoping cover on the top of that, or use a Bee Smart cover. Bee Smart cover, I guess would be fine, or a regular telescoping cover would be fine on that also. But if you wanted to add insulation to that, you just have to put in another block of insulation on top of that and then put the cover on. But that should be sufficient. That's a real high density polystyrene. So you're good with that cover as insulation.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Hey, listen, we're only 2 minutes away from ending this thing. I appreciate everybody coming. Thanks so much for the contributions. I appreciate the help. I think.
Oh, Bill, here's a picture of the inside view of that cover.
Yeah, the inner cover, I think, lets too much ventilation in for, there's no reason to ventilate something that's got a solid insulated sleeve in it. And then this is light as a feather. So if you don't watch it, it'll blow off. And it's hard to weight down because it's on the top. It's actually got a peaked top, like a pyramid top. And you just have to make sure you weight it down really good if you're gonna use it that way. So final closing arguments, Jose, in your vernacular. Nothing?
No, I'm very happy that everybody is come and participated. I want to thank everybody for contributing. So you of course are the centerpiece, but we've got other folks here who contribute regularly, and we are grateful to them because they really do enrich this event. In addition to, by the way, I see some folks on here who are mentors, and I want to thank them for their service, what they do to their for their mentees, I look forward to seeing everybody again soon.
Yeah,